You're back on the screen, my friend. Thanks for having me spill my ramblings for an hour and 20 minutes. I hope it wasn't too much or useless.
Do you know what? It's no coincidence that the sun is shining on me right now, because I definitely feel energized by that hour, 20 minutes. And I don't have any doubt that anyone else that's watching this, and there's going to be hundreds of thousands that will watch this, I can project that out because that's the way that I'm looking at things right now, are going to be in a higher vibrational state and with a better breathing behavior right now. Because I just noted towards the end, maybe 3 slides out from the end, I thought, I'm now aware of being in a higher vibrational state and in a better breathing pattern. And I feel that I'm good at regulating that anyway, but I was aware that I was better for that. I was in a better state of vibration and breathing because of that conversation that we just had. So I guess the first thing is thank you to you for doing that. And I'm sure others will be better off as well. I took away so many tidbits of greatness there. And I think if I could perhaps initiate some post masterclass conversation, I really liked that we are agents of change, that we are here to create environments for transformation. And it resonates with me because I can recall a question posed to me by Phil Plisky, who's also delivering a masterclass in this summer. And Phil said, he asked, what's the goal of communication? And once a few people threw out some relatively common definitions, he said, well, the goal of communication, or one goal of communication, is to change behavior. And he followed it up by saying, if we communicate with somebody and nothing changes, have we communicated with them? And a follow-up statement is that learning doesn't happen until behavior changes. And that speaks to the person coming into our space, which is, are they ready and willing to change? And have we created an environment where they can be transformed and they can change for the better, in those higher vibrational states, and the motion and the breathing and the outlook that they have, and obviously the conscious compassion and curious mindsets that we bring can be part of that transformational state. So I think through your presentation, through your masterclass today, you brought those 3 C's to it, because I know that I feel in a better vibrational state and I feel better in my breathing. And while I haven't enhanced my motion, that's purely because I'm sitting down, taking in a great deal of mastery. So first of all, thank you. Secondly, no, there's no second. There's only moving forward. I'm just going to take a little bit of sun off my face for a moment. Yeah. Now, Scotchy, I've got a question for you. Could you explain a little bit more about the high energy patterns and the low energy patterns?
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, mate. First, we've got to define what an energy pattern is. And the way I've understood it and actually seen it and experienced it is it's the energy we both attract into our being as well as create through our habitual thoughts, attitudes, and beliefs. But also, here's the kicker, how we respond to external events and people. So if you think of that, it's basically saying your internal reality will manifest based on what you either create or attract based on how you respond to stuff in life, which is like a very old concept. It's not new. But what Dr. David Hawkins says is we will vibrate, for want of a better phrase, at a higher energy. So things become harmonic and grow and heal, or a lower energy based on what we either create or attract. So when it comes to us in, say, a gym, a studio, performance environment, physical therapy environment, yes, there's what we say, what we look like, how we say it. But what we've got to realize is in that moment, our client, patient, and athlete have an internal reality, an internal stress that's going to affect their entire biology and their behavior. And it really comes down to their attitude. So in my world, which is half performance and half commercial health and fitness, I could immediately attach it to two simple things, even though there's infinite, right? So one of them would be, let's say that I'm coaching someone with a program that I believe is perfectly constructed. The structure, the push, the pull, the upper, the lower, the variability program. But I can see in their face, let alone their posture and their movement, they're not enjoying it. For whatever reason, they're not enjoying it. And that often starts with even our assessment. Is the way I'm assessing their movement, nutrition, lifestyle, is it seen as a judgment? Here's the benchmark. You're either good or bad, fail or need to be fixed. I've never met anyone that wants to be fixed in my life. So even the language we use or the intention of the assessment affects their internal reality. Like, here's the benchmark. Above that, high five. Below that, we've got to work on some stuff. Even that completely affects the energy attractor pattern of that individual. That's one part. So that's like the first time you meet them. Your intake, your assessment, your eval can completely change what they believe now, their attitude about their experience with you. So we've got to be very cautious. At the other end, go outside the individual and look at the group or the collective. I think this is the real big one. Health clubs are terrible for this. We've become a very form identity-based industry where what you look like and how much you can lift determines if you're successful or not successful, right? Here's the stats. Less than 15% of adults in most countries, Aussie, New Zealand, England, America, etc., less than 15% of adults regularly go to a health club. Of that 15%, in 12 months, 50% will be gone. So I'm actually down to like 7.5% of people are still there. Of that 7.5%, mate, less than 3% work with a coach. 3% of the 7.5%. So we're less than 1% of people work with a coach. Most coaches, let's be honest, you see them on Instagram taking selfies of their abs. You're in the club, they're wearing shirts that are too small. Everyone around that person who's feeling anxious, fearful, unsafe, being in the gym in the first place, already tried it 10 times and failed. They know they're overweight. They know it, right? And everyone around them looks like what they don't look like. The music you're playing is full of language that's maybe misogynistic and harmful and intimidating. Okay, what's the global message you're sending that client? That, right?
Yeah.
We take it as normal, like, well, that's what the club plays. Is it? Is that normal? And then you look up at the big screens they got on the wall with what's supposed to be motivational images scrolling through. And again, it's people taking selfies of their abs. Like, I'm sorry to tell anyone in the industry, but I haven't found one research paper that says when you work out with your top off, you get stronger.
Yeah.
Who are you motivating? You're actually harming. So again, it comes back to this idea of harm or harmony. And when we want to vibrate and live and believe and move at higher levels, we have to feel safe, first and foremost. We have to feel love and belonging, second of all. If we do that, it leads to self-esteem. And if it leads to self-esteem, it leads to self-actualization. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We can't expect people to aspire, let alone behave in ways that are at their highest potential, if the environment they're in reinforces everything they hate about themselves.
Yeah.
After 25 years of coaching and building health clubs and running sports teams and coaching people, I really do think, mate, like that's reality. Is that why in a world where we've got more resources, more education, more science, more coaches, more awareness, more education, more marketing than ever around health, wellness, performance, do we not have any more people moving regularly? It's a big question for me. So when we talk about energy attractor patterns, what you say, how you look, and how you say it is important. Are you setting them up for success? Are you judging them consciously or unconsciously? And then what about your environment? What about everything that you've allowed in your environment? What's the message that's sending to the individual in front of you right now? and that includes your staff. You know, so for me, I can't separate this idea of energy attractor patterns from human performance and potential.
Sure.
Like,
Sure. Why would you? You don't need to separate. Yeah. Why would you? I mean, your message is so resonating in lots of different ways, and I'm not quite sure where to start, but I know that Rhett, who's also delivering a masterclass in this summit, he talks about the perfect program. The perfect program is not as effective as the significantly less perfect program that people enjoy more.
that's why he's world class, right?
Yeah. And, you know, a fantastic book by Chip and Dan Heath called Switch, which is How to Affect Change When Change is Difficult. They talk about the concept of tell a little story. There's an elephant. Okay. So you're a person sitting on top of an elephant and you're riding the elephant to your destination. If I would like to help you sitting on top of the elephant heading towards your destination, I could effectively do it in 3 ways. I could talk to you, the rider. Now let's think about the rider as being the academic, intellectual part of you, the conscious part of you. I could talk to you and give you instructions. Alternatively, I could motivate the elephant, because inevitably the elephant, if it decides to go in a different direction to what the brain or the thoughts or the willpower or the intellect decides, the elephant will always win. And that's your emotional states. I'm going to eat that donut, even though I think I probably shouldn't do so.
Love it.
And then the third, so we can direct the rider, we can motivate the elephant. And the last one is we can shape the path. You can create a circumstance or an environment or a path where the elephant doesn't necessarily have a choice but to go in a particular direction. Okay. And so that way you bypass the intellect, you bypass the motivation of the elephant, because all it sees is really only one option, because the path has been created. Now, maybe it's not one option, but maybe you've created an environment or a path where the elephant is motivated to go in that direction.
Love it.
And you have this circumstance where if you just speak intellectually to people and give them all the facts and the figures, you end up with paralysis by analysis. Okay. And so we need to be aware of the emotions that we're creating by our words and our actions and our attitudes and our behaviors, as you've said. But then there are moments, and we saw this in China all the time, where if you find it really difficult to affect change, but you want to, if you create an environment where sneakily, not subvertly or covertly, but sneakily, you create an environment where people gravitate towards a particular direction, you start to see change occurring, and that's shaping the path. And I think you're right in looking at what environment a health club or a physical therapy enclosure, that's not even the right word, or a physical therapy clinic might facilitate. It's like, am I shaping the path for this person to walk out of here better than they walked in, and to want to stay on that particular path? I think you're absolutely correct in that. It's a great book, Switch, but you summed it up in it doesn't make any sense. I don't see any scientific literature that says that what we're doing in health clubs is producing better outcomes, because the data just says that ain't the case. And maybe it is that we're not shaping the path. Maybe we're not creating the environment to set a positive harmonic resonance.
That's key, mate. I love what you said. I'm going to steal that story, because what we talk about at Pivotal is creating environments for transformation to occur. Yeah. I can't change you. It would be ignorant and arrogant to think I can. It's an imposition. It's funny, right? When we talk about just movement, I often say to coaches, what you think is your perfect position for that movement is often an imposition to the person's body. Like, why don't you just try respecting what they bring you rather than imposing on it? Yeah. Because unless you got X-ray vision, you can't actually see anything inside that skin, let alone the clothes. But then you've ignored mental, emotional, spiritual, non-physical energy that impacts how we move. You can't do that. You're basically, you know what it is? It's like you've got 5 pieces of a 100-piece jigsaw and you think you know the whole picture. Yeah. It's insanity. Yeah. It's absolutely insanity what we do. It doesn't mean there aren't great guiding principles around movement that we all believe in. But come on, that's one part of the jigsaw.
Yeah, of course. You know, there's another element to it when we as clinicians do an evaluation, which is a parent term for assessment, testing, screening, scanning. We do an evaluation and we find some things that are below the metrics that we've been assured or that we've researched or that we have experience in. So someone moves in a way that's below a metric that we think is significant enough for us to know about. Another way to say it is they move in a particular way that's outside a bandwidth of tolerance. Okay, we just say that's significant. Now that might be that you measure someone's hip internal rotation and you find out that it's less than 30 degrees. And we say, well, in general, the human should probably have 30 degrees, absolute minimum. So if a person's displaying less than 30 degrees, we don't use the language, as you rightfully pointed out, we don't say it's a fail or it's bad. If we get to the circumstance where we feel like we've got to talk about that loss, we say, at the moment, something that's going on in your life is not allowing you to access that range of motion. And so we need to, as it turns out, if you can't access 30 degrees of internal rotation, that doesn't mean that you've got a hip problem. It means that you have an organism and an energy and an environment problem that's not allowing you to do that. And the number of times that we've seen that hip internal rotation now drift comfortably well above that 30 degrees, when you intervene in a way that's not related to the hip, is very, very high. It's a huge number of times. It may be something like some resetting of breath control, some attention to the lymphatic system, whether that be through any of the clusters in the foot, the back of the knee, the spleen, the viscera, the neck, the chest, and you get after some of those areas with breath control and some 3D motion elsewhere. And then you come back and say, by the way, let me have a look and see whether you're accessing that hip. And suddenly it's come back again. So I think the language is so important that we don't talk about you failed, this is bad, this is a disability. It's like, oh, for some reason your body's not accessing it. And of course, if you have difficulty accessing some areas, you will have no choice but to impose posture. And then you'll have those impositions. And so you create access to those and suddenly the body tends to find that it's no longer an imposition, that it feels comfortable being in position. So I think the language is so important, and it's one of the things that we often teach is to say, when you evaluate someone and you measure and it's below normative values, peer-reviewed, widely published, don't say to somebody that that's bad or that's a dysfunction or it's a disability. Just say, oh, you're having some difficulty accessing those patterns. And I think that energy that you give off in that phrase is probably an example of those positive harmonic states, as opposed to, and even if it's not positive, it's at least not pushing you into the negative.
Yeah. And you know what? One of the things I love that is this idea of success. When you look at the emotional brain, the cognitive brain, and how biology follows thought, nobody wants to fail at anything. Everybody wants to succeed. So even making sure that the metrics, the GPS coordinates we give them for success are achievable.
Yeah. And,
you know, I know we're short on time, but I would say even this idea of you have to, quote, squat to a certain depth. It's like, okay, in my experience of, I don't know, many, many thousands of coaching of clients, athletes, and patients, I have found the vast majority of people never hit that benchmark. But if in their mind, and coaches and professionals are the worst, they have to always squat to a certain level. But they don't realize they've got either a structural deficit, a functional deficit, an emotional, energetic deficit. Actually going to that level often creates a break where there was a block. And so you're actually harming the system. Like, not to say you couldn't one day get to that depth, but in your mind, you're so infatuated that that's what's right. That's part of the problem.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Chasing something that's not attainable is like insanity and painful. You have to stop and say, is that relevant and successful for me? Do I need to actually be able to do that? Yes or no? And some people do need to be able to do it. And to your point, create environments where there's a bit of an imposition at times. But so many people in the game of life are like, actually, I don't. It seems like you get off the toilet, okay. You get in the chair, okay. You get in the car, okay. Seems like you can squat deep enough.
Yeah. And And there's an important distinction as well, and I agree with you. There's no but at the end of that sentence. I agree with you. There's an and, which is when we in our profession evaluate someone with a squat, we're not looking at the squat to see whether somebody can be able to squat down the track. We're basically saying, I want to know how you fold yourself up in a narrow stance, because it may reveal something about how you function. And it doesn't necessarily mean it reveals something about how you squat, because if you have a great deal of difficulty doing so, then we say, oh, you can't access a squat, so I'm going to have a little bit of a deeper look. And we find out that there is a difficulty somewhere in your body that manifests as the squat. Now that would tell us a little bit more about why somebody's having difficulties in the thing that they came to us for. So we have this mantra which says that a functional test is something which reveals function. Yes, it's something which reveals your ability to respond and adapt to internal and external stimuli. And a functional exercise is one which actually enhances your ability to respond and adapt to internal and external stimuli. And it's important to then put a third element in here. The functional test or exercise is not called functional because of what it looks like. Mm-hmm. It's a functional test because of what it reveals, and it's a functional exercise because of what it produces. And so we use a squat to reveal something, and later on we may use a squat to produce something. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's the only way you can do it. I could find out revelations about somebody in ways that doesn't necessarily related to a squat. And we can produce force production in a horizontal and vertical direction using triple extension in ways that doesn't necessarily involve you squatting. So the squatting, I think a lot of people are married to squatting, and I don't think that we need to. I think the squatting is one expression, okay, and it's an expression based on the stresses, and it can be revealing, of course. So yeah, and I wanted to kind of introduce you, unless you've already heard of it, of course, this concept of the TEAR principle. The TEAR principle happens in every single person, every day of their life, whether they know it or not. And it's called the thoughts, emotions, actions, results. So every thought that you have generates some subconscious emotion, and it's either positive or negative, in harmony or high energy or low energy. You could throw every single English or non-English word out there, and it will effectively dichotomize towards a good sounding word or a bad sounding word. So an emotion being happy, sad, delighted, angry, okay? We could keep effectively putting them in two general categories. Every thought that we have causes us to feel something good or bad. There's actually a third category, which is indifference. Many thoughts that we have don't necessarily generate a bad emotion or a good emotion. They generate an indifferent emotion. But there's a third step, is that you then will act because of that bad or because of that very good. Or if it's an indifferent emotion, you'll simply just not act, or you'll keep acting the same way that you do. As a result of your action, you get a result. You look up upon that result and think on it. So it actually, TEAR, continues to the next cycle. You get a result, you think about it. You think on that result and say, do I like that result? Yeah, I actually do. So that leads to a new good emotion, which means that you continue to act to get that result, or you refine your action to get a better result. If you look upon your result and you think about it and it makes you feel bad, then you have the option to change the action, get a new result, think on it again. And this cycle goes on ad nauseum for your entire life. What happens on occasions is individuals will effectively bypass the thinking component, and they'll go emotions, actions, results, emotions, actions, results. The results will trigger an emotion, and then they'll act on that impulsively. And we can, then maybe they're just not accessing that thought component, or maybe people are accessing the thought component excessively. You know, they're the rider on top of the elephant, and they're not being aware of the emotional actions that are coming from the elephant underneath. And as a result, they're not getting to the results that they want. And so we have that environmental responsibility and that coaching words responsibility and that program shaping responsibility to generate, great thoughts that lead to positive emotions that allow people to take actions that lead to results that we can say, how do you feel about those results? Are you happy with where you're going? Because I think everyone should walk out of our space better than they walked into it.
Yeah, I'd agree, mate. And we have to respect their willingness and readiness to do so.
Yeah, I love this transformational change that we are the agents for change.
Yes, mate.
Well, what an amazing piece of time that you and I have had. I'm so grateful for the stress and expression masterclass, and even more so is the chat afterwards. So
me too, mate.
Good on you, champion. We'll speak soon, and I'd love to see you at the masterclass summit number 2.
I'll be there. There are no ordinary moments in a masterclass.
Brilliant.